Welcome to the late Friday afternoon edition of the Predictive Playbook. I'm your host, John Ryan, and I have I guess I can call you guys my cronies now after all. It's like I feel like I'm in I guess an old man's fraternity house, but it's just better than that. But Rob Veno's in the house with me, Tony Finn. Pleasure as always to have you guys on the show. It's fast becoming an everyday thing.
Yeah.
You're a crony?
Yeah, but Rob's more of a groupie. Well,
he'd be my only one that I never had a person in my groupie. So he would be the first one if it's referring to me. Well, it should be hard to believe.
It all depends on preferences. Personally, I prefer to have a petite blondes or that of the female persuasion that are groupies for me. But
I like that type of craft beer too. Yeah, I mean, they're good. 8 ounces. You don't drink too much.
John is not. Rob is not blonde.
No, he's definitely not.
He's definitely petite though. He got that going.
Yep. I know a fact though. None of us could have as many groupies as Joe Ranieri, and I hope you heard me say that because that's a compliment.
You guys can suck up to Joe all you want. I don't do that very well. And people tell me I don't do it very well.
I definitely couldn't do it in person and actually mean it.
Yeah, there you go.
So when I have distance between myself and him, I can say things like this and mean it. It's good. It's all good.
I've been just so the audience knows, I don't know if they feel this way, but I've been misled in many in a lot of variables on how you're supposed to approach life, how you're supposed to approach people. I was brought up to be honest, or at least try to be as honest as you can be. There's times to tell a white lie or a fib. I never could figure out that equation though, and for the most part, I have I told the white lies in the wrong time and was honest at the right. I just had it backwards. So there you go, and hence that's why I don't have my own island like you guys do. I don't have naked girls serving me margaritas right this second.
Well, I'm kind of on an island near the Delaware River, I guess. I don't know if that counts, but anyway, it's an exciting day. Yeah, I know you guys have been on a lot of shows, and I was telling Tony, like Friday afternoons when we do this show could almost be like the guys, meeting for a quick beer before, venturing on with the rest of the day. Wow. And we just get in the show when we can, and I actually gave a link to Steve Merrill. He thought he might be able to join us, but if he doesn't, he'll join us next Friday. Then
what if we start talking bad about him? Will he show up to defend himself?
Yeah, I think he would. Because maybe there's certain things I hear on that NBA show about him that
As long as he doesn't start betting
the NBA show's got kind of rogue. That NBA show, listen, used to be really, it was back in the old days. It was informative and it was fun. It's kind of a rogue show now. Well, it's been on forever. It's been on for like what now, a year and a half, something like that.
Well, with my baby face, I know for a fact I did not contribute to anything rogue, except for yesterday. So with the games coming up tomorrow, we have hammered these games. We're not going to break them down again, but it seemed like my memory serves correct. I was pretty high on Houston as probably the bet that had the most value, and also a team that I think is personally it's going to go out as one of my bets to my premium client base as a 4%er. So I feel that confident. I'm going to sprinkle a little on the money line too, and I also like them at plus 600 to win the whole darn thing. And I'm not trying to put cold water on the Baylor-Gonzaga game. That would be just as much fun for me to watch. But I've never seen a Final Four team flying under the radar, in my opinion, like Houston is. There's more talk in my Twitter applications where I go out and get the sentiment readings and from 1,100 tweets. Mm-hmm. There's twice as much talk on UCLA and a possible upset over Gonzaga than there is an upset of Houston over Baylor, and it's a contrarian flavor. So I guess that just feeds into my, my complete enthusiasm that Houston's going to win, but we have to play the game. And I think Gonzaga was our pick yesterday as well. Is that right? Fair to say?
Did we do a show yesterday?
Yeah, we did, Tony. It
That was
was
a long time ago.
yeah, it was great actually. And you were a big reason why.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And absolutely, I'll sit here and look at you right now and tell you I remember every bit of that show. Pardon me. And Gonzaga was a play. No, I remember us talking about something about the Zags. And this is a Final Four. And I know it's not probably good TV. Maybe it's not good TV. Maybe it is. But when we get down to this kind of level of games, I'm really more interested in things that are peripheral and they're just not. They're not something that most people discuss, and they probably aren't good TV. In fact, I have been told by more than one person that I have a tendency to start discussing things that nobody else, that the average Joe, the weekend warrior, doesn't even consider and may not even know that exists. And sometimes I say, well, is that a bad thing? Is that a bad thing, guys, to talk about this? It is when your show is based on viewership and bottom dollar, and you have to pay the bills. They always tell me, it's a bad thing, Tony. I said, well, do I have to pay any of those things? And then it's not a bad thing for me.
Yeah. I don't think we'd be doing this every day if it was if it wasn't
back yet since then. But
getting to know you, I would think that you do a lot of what the average Joe does on a weekend.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot more than, but, well, not really. I mean, I like to think I do, but not really. Average Joe has a heck of a lot more fun than me. Trust me. They do things with their kids and their wives, and they actually remember anniversaries and birth dates, and they even actually remember yesterday.
Rob, you want to break these comments down here and determine which ones are true, which ones are ones that he's just saying tongue in cheek, and we can really get to know this guy even better.
I tell you what, I've been around him on shows for a couple of years now and trying to assess when Tony's joking and when he's being brutally honest. I think we can tell when he's brutally honest.
Yeah.
It's
Maybe
what's half-hearted and what's disguised as truth in a joking matter that I'm not sure about.
When I break down NRBQ stats, let me tell you.
I mean, his disdain for the false gods, I understand.
And truth, it was always something I found funny, and it just kind of hung with us during that. When they'd bring it up, I would throw that in, and I may be getting old now. I might start to change my my colors, my stripes, or something, just to make it more interesting or different.
Well, I guess what we're going to have to do, Rob, is hope he doesn't show up looking like he's going to play poker, because then we're not going to be able to read his face at all. He'll have the dark sunglasses on, the hoodie.
I think I'm a pretty good poker player. Here's what: don't play poker. Why do I not play poker, guys? Why didn't you play? It takes too much time to sit down at a table and play. It's just it's worse than golf. I used to be a pretty good golfer, but I don't play golf anymore. Who the hell has time for that? Not I. Okay. Well, see, you're having more fun than me.
But I'm having more fun doing these shows in all seriousness. With the whole cast, and it's becoming a crew now. Than I do in 5 hours on the golf course. But that's equally fun too. In case my golfing friends are listening to this, I still love you guys.
Well, thanks. And my experience, John, and Rob will attest to this, and that is the more shows, the more successful we get. The less likely we are to continue, because they'll start selling us. They'll start selling our time. They'll start telling us, listen, you need to do less of this because we can make more money doing this. And I love you. I love all you guys that watch the show and that pay me a few, but I don't like that at all. I don't like to be told that, and I don't like it. The older I get, the less important that becomes, and probably why I'm still working. And why you two don't really have to work. You just do it because you do it for me. You're making me look better, and I appreciate it. So let's do it.
That's at least 10% of it.
There you go.
your price just went up.
Before I show you the betting system of the day, I don't ever see myself like slowing down like that.
No?
And
You're still selling out?
well, I didn't say that's not possible, but
I'm getting both of you there. We're getting on it.
But
Rob
I can't.
Rob would
I couldn't. I couldn't play golf every day, and wake up and have my cereal, my milk, my coffee, go play 18, come home for lunch, then go play another 18, and then watch Jeopardy, watch Wheel of Fortune.
If you're serving the best vodka and the best amphetamines on the block, I can play golf every day. I'm certain of it.
That's the part I left out of the equation. I didn't think of that part. I might be able to do it then too.
It's true.
It is.
Just being honest.
I do want to look at an NBA game for the people that are putting up with this this attempt at comedy show here.
Yeah.
But we're revenging tonight. We have a revenge situation, and I actually like this system as it reads out. Mm-hmm. You're going to bet on... Well, see if you can name the team that it's supporting. That's actually pretty hard.
You read it out, and I'm going to ask you a question.
Bet on road teams revenging a same-season loss. Mm-hmm. And there's only a second part, because I did this for the NBA show today, too. It kept it very simple. And you guys can tell me whether this is simple. So the first part, bet on road teams revenging a same-season loss. Part 2, road team is coming off a double-digit home loss.
Right.
So we have a team coming off a double-digit road loss, revenging an opponent tonight in the same season.
All right.
That has hit 66% winners for 116 and 60 and 2 pushes, 5 seasons. And if our road team, now here's a hint, if our road team has a win percentage above 60% for the season, they're 18-8 for 69% over the last 5 seasons. And if you need more help, the betting line is plus 4.5.
I would have to break that down into 10 different. As much information as you just provided, as much cryptic information you just provided, I would need probably 10 or 15 shows before I could guess that team. Would it be Oklahoma City?
Nope.
Well, see, I lose.
Win percentage has to be above 60%.
And when?
Coming
this
off,
year?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant over the last 5 years, and I thought maybe they might have been close. Maybe I'm
no, that's just the record spans bets made over the last 5 years.
Okay, all right, and they lost by double digits at home.
And they're at home.
And they're at home tonight as well.
No, they're actually on the road. They're a road team revenging a same season loss.
I got that part right, Rob, because Oklahoma City is on the road.
And they're both teams are in the same state. Where they're home. And it's the Lakers.
It's the only team. You gave that one away, kind of though. So
But I thought he said they're coming off a double-digit road loss.
Oh yeah. Well, like I said,
Lakers are coming off a double-digit home loss. Yeah. I misinterpreted it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Lakers. That's here's my question to you, both of you, and I want to hear your opinion. It doesn't have to be convoluted or stressed. Does revenge truly exist in the NBA?
At times.
Okay.
At times.
I think that's an emotional. It's an emotional state, an emotional variable that I apply to college kids without question, and I almost completely ignore to guys who are paid to play basketball. And while there are some vendettas, and there's some personal battles that guys like. There's a guy that does a lot of good work. His name's Steve Merrill, who's completely wrong about that. when he starts talking about revenge and crap like that.
Hey, Ixnay.
So John, no, I had to virtually come into the show when you're talking about the angle of the day because, of course, Joe Ranieri threw it to me to decipher today, and it was actually, I thought, probably the best one you've done, all seriousness, because it was very straightforward. There were no tight line parameters, big sample size. I don't know if Tony or Rob saw Wednesday, but Brian Leonard threw John under the bus because he had a 13-1 angle. But John
It was so bad he apologized twice.
That it was a bigger sample and it was a subset.
You see, I would never have apologized.
But here's what's funny, John, is I knew the team, and when you said above 600, I was like, John either misspoke or there's another team that qualifies tonight because I did not think of the Lakers as an above 600 team because right now they're basically a 20% win team with that lineup. So,
yeah.
But as you said, that's a very small subset. The angle was still very good for winning and losing teams. But had that been the parameter that made or break the system, I would have torn into it because the Lakers obviously are not a 60% team right now. But, yeah, and that was also the contrarian play of the day, by the way, on the NBA shows. So I was glad to see the angle sided with that. And, I mentioned, actually, I filled in for Teddy on Wednesday, and I mentioned on the Big Game Breakdown, I liked Milwaukee was the one I used, fading the Lakers. But the Lakers had beaten Orlando and Cleveland right before that. So they've taken care of some crap teams. And I still think Sacramento's not a playoff caliber team, whether they're winning or not. They're not beating those. So I did like that angle a lot, actually. I'm glad I was able to jump in as you guys were talking about it, because I thought it made a lot of sense. Oh, John, I know I was going to ask you, though, and on the show I didn't know for sure. You said lost a previous meeting. Is that just any point this year, or is that the most recent previous meeting for revenge?
That would be the most recent meeting between the two teams.
Okay, because I think that carries a little more weight, so I'm glad to hear that.
Yep.
And Tony, I will say quickly on the revenge thing,
yeah,
I do use it a lot in the NBA because I'm basically a situational guy in the NBA, and it's not because they want to get revenge. I think it's more so teams sometimes overlook them. And in this case, I could understand the Kings overlooking a bad Lakers squad that they've already beaten. So I think I don't know what you want to call it, maybe an anti-revenge situation, but I think that's how revenge works in the NBA, to be honest.
And I don't, again, I explained it a bit. It's an emotional variable. It's in many ways it's just not tangible. It's not, it's just something that statistically is very difficult to be accurate with or pinpoint, in my opinion. But I always think it exists in kids that are playing for different reasons than the professionals are, for the most part. But I want to believe that these guys are playing professional basketball. They play for a paycheck. It's their job. And while they may not like player B on team B or team A, that we are humans. So it's always going to be some variable, to some degree.
And Tony, I agree. I use it a lot in college football and basketball, and not as much in the pro sports. But it's something that we could say here again. I don't know if it's really revenge, but like in hockey this year, I don't do a lot with hockey, but it's been intriguing me because they have all these head-to-head quick spots.
They're making it different.
Playoffs, it's not really the zigzag theory isn't really revenge, but it does work the same. So
if you had to play that same team 20 times in a row, and your job, it wasn't just a job, your job depended on winning, then animosity, there's absolutely something's going to happen inside that pot that's going to boil, a little segment of it, or a person to person or a personnel duel. But what's happening in hockey, and to some degree, I guess in the NBA too, and a lot more back-to-backs next day. And significant at this point in time. I think they're significant. While I have some questions to you guys, I'd love to have if we had time. I think they're already inflating lines in the NBA, and I think it's a bit early, but maybe I'm wrong. I think there's some lines that are being inflated already. The trade deadline's gone, so it's almost like after the call-ups, the September call-ups in baseball. You know how those lines have a tendency to get inflated because we know that you may have 8 prospects on one side of the diamond starting the next day,
I did. I'll mention this though about the system that granted, if LeBron and Anthony Davis, and this is part of the system and why I like it so much. If they were playing, they wouldn't be underdogs, so the system wouldn't even come up. The fact is that you have the starters, and then you have some key bench players that are trying to stick in the NBA. And to me, it's logical that they would want to play at a very highly focused level, not because they're underdogs, not because they lost to the Kings, but trying to make an impression on the team so that they can remain a Laker. And I think that almost becomes the most difficult job for a college football coach, because if it's revenge, and we always talk about, can a college football team beat the same team 3 times in the same season? And it becomes like emotion is a very good thing. But if your mind is completely focused on beating the crap out of the opponent because they beat you twice, you're going to lose the 3rd time. But if the emotion is used for a focus on executing plays and that, then you might get your win. But that's my take on it.
Well, John, real quick on this too, though. I mean, something we've seen all season long. It's been money in the bank, and it's so hard to do it. Is to play on these teams that are missing guys, and there's so many reasons it's worked. And we saw it back in college football. Rob, it's funny. I know you do a lot with college football. I keep thinking of that Boise State game. It was a weeknight game, I think, where they moved it like a touchdown, and Boise State went on and won by like 40 still. And they were COVID. The COVID issues in college football was a pure play on those teams, and we've seen it for decades. I mean, I know Rob, Tony, and myself have used it for decades in both, any pro sport really, but especially the NBA. When a key guy is out that first game or so, and we all three of us talked a lot about it last summer and this year on the NBA Tip-Off Show, is not only are they a play-on team, and it's not long-term. It's usually that first or second game they get a little bump, like when you fire a manager or head coach, you get a little bump. But I think the other reason the angle works better than ever maybe is because the other team overlooks them, is what I think. And that, there again, could be what the Kings do here. It's more that they're not going to take the Lakers seriously without LeBron and Anthony Davis. And we've got that situation tonight, by the way, with Golden State. I was really close to using that as my free play on the NBA Tip-Off Show today. Just couldn't quite do it. I went with the Grizzlies instead because they're off a loss, Minnesota off a win. But Toronto, how is Toronto laying 4.5 against anybody right now?
Makes
Teddy
no sense.
actually mentioned that as kind of a co-best bet. Teddy went with the Rockets and the Warriors, kind of fading the Celtics and the Raptors laying big points because
I have that game's a pick 'em in my charts. That game's a pick 'em on my power rankings. So I've been talking to people about that game already this morning. That's where the comment and some things
that's
are inflated.
That's definitely on my radar. Double digits. I guess it's 11.5 right now, right?
Curry?
Huh?
You have it as a pick 'em without Curry in the lineup?
Without Curry, no, I don't. But I'm saying on a straight up basis.
I saw, and that's why it's 4.5.
Right.
But
well, it happened. It's been the last couple of nights, and I could even go to Dallas and New York. It looks like to me Randall's playing, and it looks like to me that Doncic's playing, and my power rankings certainly do not have. While Dallas is more explosive, this plays out to be a low-scoring game. 6 points, I think, is the value. I think getting New York at home and the 6 points is the value. That's my opinion, and it's happened for almost going on a week, but after the trade deadline, definitely, I just seem, and maybe my imagination might be ahead, but it just appears that we're starting to get some inflated prices, some perception, from perception value or misperception value, should I say, and a play on the dog for the most part.
Yeah, and this is their fourth road game of 5 for Dallas too.
I guess I've already played once I didn't win, and what I believe to be a bad number and a value play, and I've only dipped into that. I've only dipped my foot into that body of water one time so far. I've been wrong. I've been right on several of them. I just didn't. I didn't take the plunge. So.
What's interesting to me, guys, is that these situations where a team is out and they move the line 4 or 5 points, and I've been
an injury chasing thing.
About a month ago, I had back-to-back nights in the NBA where I beat the closing line by 6 and 3 points, 9 points combined on a Sunday and Monday. I think the Clippers are involved with both, not surprisingly, because they've basically been the textbook team this year for these situations. And I lost both of those games. It wasn't I was catching 9 points of line value. Neither the closing or the opening line hit. So it's not like it's the extra 2 points that's making the difference here. A lot of these are just outright underdog wins, and it's amazing how they've just been blowing the line out. And I think a lot of it is the other team just doesn't show up. And I think the other guys do step up as well. These are all still college all-stars on every NBA team, and these guys can score in their sleep nowadays. So it's not like these backups can't get it done. Whereas in a college game, there are situations you lose 1 or 2 players, you just have nothing left on the bench, and it's just blowout city. But it's been an interesting phenomenon for decades, but I've never seen it hit like it has this year. It's almost an automatic play just to take the contrarian side of these injuries and stuff when guys are out.
I agree. I completely agree. But Teddy was on Houston, huh? Because I like Houston too as a
first time all year, John. He said he hasn't used them all season. It's only a free play. He's not. I don't think he's using it as the best bet. But
yeah, I would agree with that too.
I will say I didn't look too much of that game, but about a week ago when we were digging in on it, they're terrible run point spread wise, and it's interesting because I know, John, you and I love to do research, and it's just been textbook example this year with the Utah Jazz, and now the Rockets, the extreme opposite, just for a terrible run. And it's going to go down really for research for the ages when you're looking at streaks, good and bad. And when Utah's flipped, it's when they hit the road and their defense started giving up over 50% every game. So that was very obvious what happened there. And with Houston, it's just they've been god-awful offensively during all those losses. But about a week or two ago, they started hitting 45, 48% in games, and that's when they started covering a few. So I think that's what to keep an eye on with the Rockets is that they can start scoring because they were just atrocious offensively there for about a month.
Yeah, it's true. Like the Kings were in that too because I remember taking you had said only a financial guy can say catch a falling knife, so I started saying it, and Sacramento had gone down the toilet so fast and so over almost 3 weeks that the knife had already hit the floor and was bouncing off of it, and that was the analogy I used for that, if that makes any sense. But the totals and the system that Brian Leonard was referencing has actually revealed a lot of good information because the 111 wasn't like an arbitrary number. That's the league average, so league scoring average. So a team that's scoring more than or allowing more than the league average. And it made me look at because I mentioned this to Rob when we were. It was just he and I before Tony came on one day this week. That doesn't it feel like the scoring in the NBA is way up this year? Inherently, like if you didn't know the answer to it, you would think, "Oh my God, these totals are like out of sight."
Right.
So interesting interesting to know though. It's 111.8 as of yesterday.
Yep.
I don't know if that changed or not. Last year it was 111.7, and the year before that was, I think, Rob, what did I say? 111.1, 111.2. Then it drops down to 106. In the 2017 season. And then the totals, which I actually have in front of me here, the highest total in 2018 season was 243 points, and it occurred twice. The low was 196.5. So now we're going to just write those down or keep them in your head. 2019, the low was 200, and that occurred twice. And the high was 247.5, and that occurred also twice. And then 2020, which is this season, we have similar result. The lowest total so far has been 200.5, and the highest total has been 246. But as Rob and I were talking, there's a lot more games that are higher than 235. Than in previous seasons. There's a lot more games that are actually 215 or lower, believe it or not. Given some of the teams that play solid defense, I actually think the Sixers are one of those that have played pretty well to the under because of the defense. But you mentioned the Kings, and that's another reason I like the Lakers tonight because they completely forgot how to play defense, and that just gives bench players that are on the Lakers. I mean, they're NBA players. They're pretty good.
I will say, guys, none of these guys have forgotten. I know that's a phrase, but I don't believe any of these guys have forgotten how to play defense. I believe wholeheartedly that schemes tend to ignore defense or put less value on it now than they did 5 years ago. I'm certain of it, and there's several coaches that will verbalize that. They'll basically tell you, I just don't put, I think we're better offensively, and we don't have to expend that energy and be a switching team on top of the, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, guys. We can shoot better. We're a better shooting team. Our skill set is superior in that area. So it's not like they're just letting them go lay the ball in, but I think that there's coaches. I know there's coaches right now that scheme. I just want you to stand in front of them, make them shoot from the perimeter. We'll take our chances. We'll shoot better than they will in a 48-minute period. Let's take the approach on that probability alone, and it's resulted in. It doesn't result in games that are 280s, but it certainly does result in games that are more 122 to 127 that we may have seen 5 years ago. Certainly more than we did see 20 years ago when we had totals of 178, and the Knicks and the Celtics were meeting up for totals that were 184, and that may be high. 184, I'm under that, that kind of thing.
I know it's making me feel old, guys, because I know we all remember totals in the 180s. In fact, I'm shocked when you just said the lowest total in any of the last 2 or 3 seasons is not below 200. I mean, that's just insane. I would have lost a huge amount of my bankroll taking the other side of that bet. And I'm also surprised that the last 3 years have been the same, because this year because I look at the numbers as far as the lines, and there's no question we've had more high totals this year, so I'm really surprised by that. But whenever you get an increase in scoring, and there's a lot of groupthink with like offense, like the NFL or the NBA now.
Yes.
There's always opportunity for that smart coach to kind of scheme the other way, and that's what we've seen the Knicks do this year.
Yeah.
The Knicks, I believe their season total win was like 22.5. They were 24-22 a couple of days ago. They'd already gone over the total about halfway through the season, which is remarkable. Because that's how they have to play. It's kind of like an option team in football. Like those service academies know they can't compete athletically with the big boys, so they run the triple option. It gives them a chance to compete. The New York Knicks are the triple option of the NBA this year. John, let me ask you real quick, though. Do you have the median averages? Because I think that would be more telling. The median total has to be up. Although you said there's been more low totals, so maybe not. But I would guess that the median scoring is up this year from the last two, as far as more than half the league is scoring more than they were last year. But I might be wrong on that. I'd be curious to see what those numbers were, though.
Yeah, I can.
While he's looking that up, guys.
Yeah.
Innovation play a part in this. The step back is executed properly. Is almost can't defend it. There's things that players do now. They're more accurate from distance. There's lots of things the reasons we have higher totals. Some officiating, if you want to go that far too. But that step back is again a hard. And that step back, those guys, it's not defendable without foul. In truth, in this environment, without fouling, my opinion.
Mr. Veno, do you want to chime in here? I don't think I've heard from you in like at least 3 minutes.
Well, I would say this. I think in the NBA, you'll find about 26 out of 30 teams that are lousy pick-and-roll defenses. And pick-and-roll is
I agree.
The initial offense used by anybody. So if you just start there, and then just add to the fact that, coaches are smart. It's easier to score with a spread-out floor than it is to walk the ball up and play somebody's half-court defense. I mean, it's common sense, and that's what they've gone to now. Spread the floor. Tony made a good point about the fact that, we see guys like Damian Lillard and Trae Young now that don't just shoot your average three-pointer. They pull up on logos 35 feet away from the basket, and you just can't, run a guy off the three-point line. Well, where are you going to run? All the way to half court? Chase him off a shot? You guys can make those shots now.
And they dribble by you, too. They're so quick off the dribble that if you cover it, they go by you. So it's a no-win. Yeah.
It just becomes, more options for the offense to score. So I think, to some degree, pick-and-roll defense is a lot to blame. And whether it be regular season, I hate to call guys lazy, but not applying themselves in pick-and-roll defense during regular season. We see somewhat of a change in the playoffs, but not even as drastically there anymore. But that's to me, that's kind of the reasons why I don't. These guys come up.
Well, I think it's a good point, Rob. I think it's a point that I should have brought and should have said. I think it's a good point. You want to look at percentages of pick and roll and why the Celtics aren't doing very well this year. Is Kemba Walker is not the same player as he was last year, and that pick and roll with Kemba last year was almost impossible to stop when executed properly. And the percentages are 30%, 40% less. They're running that pick and roll with Kemba, and they're running with the younger kids. You're right. Let's be honest. Listen, the Kemba's almost a negative. It was almost a negative in the lineup the first 20 games back. When he was in the lineup, they were scoring less points per possession than without him.
Yeah, you have to have big guys defensively that can get back and cover that. Last year in the playoffs, we saw teams put Nikola Jokic in pick and roll time after time after time after time because it's successful. Now, he gets it back on the other end for you, and he's not a minus on the floor because he's going to create offense like no other big man. But, thinking off the top of my head, Bam Adebayo, centers like that who can recover quick enough, they're at a premium. I don't know where you find them anymore. They're just not there. So, to me, the NBA always starts. That's the first look on offense is always, okay, pick and roll. And if you can't defend it, they'll run it all game long and score 130 on you. So, I think until you find it, probably, you know what it's a correlation to, guys? It's a correlation to the linebacking position in the NFL nowadays, where you have to have that speed to cover and ability to tackle. Tampa Bay had the linebackers to be able to stop Kansas City. These SEC linebackers that are coming out now, no longer is the standard middle linebacker a good option on your defense. You have to have these guys that can run sideline to sideline and also cover tight ends and slot receivers and everything else. So I think that's the way of the big man now. We'll see if college basketball starts breeding those types. I'm not sure that they're out there, but if you can get your hands on one, it's good for defense, that's for sure. Miami's a great defense, right? Especially this year with Bam Adebayo.
I have the NBA answer for all of you. So I'm going to start with 2020. The median is 112.2. 2019 median scoring 111.8. 2018 111.1. 2017 105.6. 2016 104.9. And in 1996, because we were talking about this yesterday, there were 4 teams in 1996 averaging more than 100 points per game, and the median was 95.
That's the year I started, guys. How appropriate is that, John? That was the year I started as a professional handicapper. So, boy.
It's all your fault.
I thought it was the Chicago. But I remember the first NBA playoffs I capped as a pro was 1997. I dug so deep into the research, for all the systems and trends. And basically it was like Class A Game 1 favorites and unders. But there was also the Chicago Bulls that made all that happen, basically, because research in the 90s was basically all about the Bulls. So, that brings back memories. That's incredible. 4 teams only averaged 100 points. Wow. Here, let me ask you this, guys. And Rob and Tony, you've been around for a while, and you've seen some NBA since the 80s. Tony more so than all of us, maybe the 70s if we go back. But
60s?
I mean, I remember the
Jojo
NBA
White,
was
60s,
high scoring
yes.
for a while in the mid-'80s and even the 70s. So, now the 3 is more prevalent than it. In fact, they didn't even have a 3-point line in the mid-'70s, and they were still putting up 100 a game. So I guess, Tony, was that just all pace of play in your opinion back then? And I know, Rob, you studied some of the history as well. It's just we've had high-scoring NBA way back in the day, and then things cooled off for some reason for 20 years or so.
Well, back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, those times when we spoke about earlier, and that was the defense was important, and it was not just important, it was featured. It was emphasized. Listen, you don't see that kind of defense. First off, when a guy went to the rim in the 70s and the 80s, he didn't go to the rim. He might have gone to the rim clean one time. Now it's a flagrant 2. You're out of the game. It's back then that was part of it was part of the deal. You want to go to the rim? Come on, because you're going to go on your ass a couple times. Just because it's going to prevent you from going maybe a third and a fourth, and it plays into. I've mentioned it. You guys have heard me say it, and I know you guys have all said it too. What happened to no blood, no foul? I know what happened. I know what happened in the NFL. I know that they outlawed gas. I mean, when a defensive back farts, he's called for pass interference. You can't help but have high-scoring games. And in the NBA, I still think that there's. I think I complain about this year, guys. The officials are lazy. They have a lot of new officials right now. They don't run to get in their positions. They make calls they can't possibly make from the corner. I just can't make them. I can barely see them with a camera on the play that they can't possibly see from the ground with 3 players in front of that play. There are a lot of things that happened, but more than anything else is the 3-point line, is the skill set, is the way people approach basketball now. It's not as physical as it used to be. It isn't even considered a physical game. I still think it should be a physical sport. No blood, no foul, and damn it, if you're going to come in the lane, you're going to come like you think you're Michael Jordan and take off from the free throw line. It's probably going to be the only time you're going to do it that game. And
I have one other thing to add.
Theory here, Steve. Let me give you a theory. I mean, in the early 70s when I was probably grade school, what Tony's talking about was absolutely true. It was more of a defensive game. But I think, from my own standpoint, that when the ABA merged with the NBA and let loose all those scorers, you got guys like George McGinnis and George Irvin and Dan Issel and David Thompson and all these guys that were high flying, and Julius Irving. Right. When they came from the ABA to the NBA, scoring opened up, because I think you're talking about the point you were trying to make was in the 80s, Celtics, Lakers, and stuff. A lot of those games were high scoring. The Hawks with Dominique Wilkins were high scoring. I think all that transfusion of offensive-minded basketball from the ABA, which was all offensive-minded from its opening tip to finish, those players got into the NBA, and scoring immediately, to me, increased throughout the 80s. Now, it got slowed down because Detroit decided they were going to beat the hell out of everybody through their run. And then it was okay for a while. And then Pat Riley decided, when he had Alonzo Mourning, that he was going to beat the hell out of everyone. And then the Knicks decided, well, we have Charles Oakley and Pat Ewing. John, we talked about this the other day.
Yeah.
And Indiana had Rick Smits and Dale Davis. And that period, especially that period that Steve's talking about when he started, say 1996 to 1999, I mean, the Eastern Conference was nothing but a mugging every single night. And John, I think you went back and looked up some totals for us, because I can remember playoff games then being like 170.
Good memories.
There's a couple below 170.
Good memories.
Usually involved the Heat.
Yeah, I mean, that team, and Riley's the guy who started it mid-90s. He went to that style of play. Knicks followed. Indiana was right there, like I say, with Dale Davis and Derek McKee and Rick Smits and those guys. And the Western Conference was a little different, right? The Western Conference stayed wide open.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I just think that those ABA players, when that merge happened, brought a lot of offense and a lot of excitement, a lot of higher scoring to the 80s NBA basketball.
I don't want to get too far off before you say something, Steve. Yeah. But I ask myself, I don't handicap hockey. I enjoy the hell out of hockey, but I limit myself when it comes to what I handicap. But in the last couple of years, the 5.5 mean, that was the total mean. 5.5, that's a low total. It's become 6.5. And the skill set, I saw something the other day, and you can comment. And I can't remember the name of the guy, but I only saw it once. It's all I had to see it for. It made me almost. It made me throw up a little bit in my mouth, and that was the guy had he was on a breakaway. He got hit pretty good about 20 feet from net, and he cut hard, went across the crease, and shot a goal between his legs on the goalie, and the goalie did not get up and pound the shit out of the guy. Because if you do that in my world, you go between your legs and embarrass me. It's the same thing on the basketball court then. If you're going to embarrass me, you're going to pay the price for that 15-minute moment, and that's what we faced.
Tony,
skill set is unbelievable.
It's funny that you bring that up, because what changed hockey, in my opinion, is the European invasion. And you can look at the stats of how fewer Canadians.
Yeah.
That's when all the thuggetry and all the enforcers went out as well. You can make that argument actually with basketball. I mean, we've got the Nowitzkis and the Europeans coming in at the turn of the century, and that's also those guys are more offense than defense, as we all know. And other thing, John, I pulled up some stats here. 96 actually had above average 3-point shots, but let's look at 97 through 2000. League-wide, around 13 attempts per game. The last couple years, 34, 35 attempts per game. That's almost like triple.
The makes are almost equal to the attempts.
Right, and then the makes were less than 5 per game in the turn of the century, and now it's about 11 to 12 per 12 and a half per game. So they're making almost 3 times more threes.
The
other thing too, not only the
math says shoot them, right?
But it's a monkey see, monkey do. The NFL's like that now. Everyone wants the pass happy, the West Coast offense in college and pro football. Let's look at the last 4 years. That's when the 3-point shooting's exploded, really the last 3 or 4 seasons. When did the Golden State Warriors start winning a lot of championships and become a dynasty? 4, 5, 6 seasons ago. And they did it ahead of the curve with the 3. And everybody else is playing catch-up now. Something will change here in 4 or 5 years. And the reason I thought of that analogy, because I agree with it, is that we talked about the 90s. And I mentioned earlier, when I was starting in the mid-90s, it was all the research I was doing with Chicago Bulls. They were the dynasty throughout the decade. The Pistons were right before them with hard-nosed defense as well. You mentioned the Miami Heat. If you're going to beat the champions, the best teams in the league, whether it was the Bulls in the 90s, the Warriors the last 10 years, you've got to try to do what they do or do it better. Unless you're like the Knicks, as I said. I think actually you try to do something different and be ahead of the curve. But, these pro leagues, the NFL, the NBA, it's all monkey see, monkey do. Baseball, the A's were ahead of the curve with the whole, Moneyball thing, and then everybody else is doing it now. They're copycat leagues, and it's for a reason, because there's job security of being the status quo. You don't want to be out on the fringe and then really blow it. You just want to hold your job. These NFL guys, these NBA guys as well. They get fired by one team, they get hired by another. It's a big coaching fraternity, a big circle. But I really think the Golden State Warriors have a lot to do with what's happened the last 2-3 years, and then the European invasion longer term, other things like that. It's fascinating to watch.
I pulled up the last year of the ABA, and interesting enough, it is a league that almost resembles what we have now in terms of scoring. 112.5 league average, and by the way, this is 1975-76. Denver Nuggets were the high, 121.9 per game. San Diego Sales. Well, you can't be a basketball team called the Sales. They're scoring 98.8. Then the good old Virginia Squires. Julius Erving was part of this, McGinnis. And that whole movement then went to the NBA the following year. And the scoring did go up a lot.
It's a good
Just
call,
a lot
Rob.
of talented
I was
guys,
with
John.
you on that one. I know Rob's an old ABA guy.
a lot of talented guys, a lot of talented offensive players in that league. David Thompson, he went to the NBA, and the scoring title came down to the very last game of the year one year. I think he had 73 in the final game to win a scoring title. But
it may not be a good example. It might not be a good example, but the coaches for the first thing I think about, you guys just mentioned it, when I think about the Denver Nuggets, going all the way back to the ABA, is you think about the George Karls and the coaches they've had there, really offensive coaches. Am I incorrect with that? I mean, Malone's not that way necessarily, but these guys, it seemed like to be a running gun. It makes sense to do that at altitude as well, in my opinion. So,
we had Doug Moe, Denver Nuggets.
It's the exact same thing, Tony. The ABA, to make a direct correlation, is the same thing that the AFL was before it merged with the NFL.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got Sid Gilman. Sid Gilman ran offense back in the 60s that they're running today, and they think is so innovative when he was doing it 50 years ago. So when that whole group of AFL teams got set free into the NFL, then you saw more offensive play there and a little more wide open offense. So, I mean, what's interesting, the point about the NBA in the 90s and all the defensive teams and the copycat league and the monkey see, monkey do, is that it only took place in one conference. The Eastern Conference was the only conference where every team was a group of, fouling, bashers, low-scoring teams. The Western Conference never followed that. The Western Conference with the Lakers and the Trailblazers, and maybe Utah with Stockton and Malone was one example, but the Seattle Supersonics were not that way. The good teams still played quick in the West. It only applied to the East, which is kind of strange. It wasn't league-wide.
Yeah, that's a pretty good pick and roll outfit right there, Stockton and Malone.
And they played the Bulls in the finals that one year. So not a surprise. They played like an Eastern team and made the finals in the West. So not a surprise there.
They did a few good things.
Yeah, they did.
A few good things.
Yeah.
Sean Kemp and Gary Payton did a few good things, but it wasn't necessarily predicated off of defense.
Yeah.
Well, you guys were talking about this was yesterday. We were talking about Major League Baseball, Charlie Lau's swing, and everything's home runs.
Yes.
In contrast now. And I was thinking about it last night. You look at the World Series champs, and of the last several years, the number one team that comes to mind is San Francisco. And in the playoffs, they suddenly started going opposite field. Literally every single hit was opposite field in the gaps, not trying to hit home runs, and they won. The Dodgers, some of the players did it last year. I noted that. Wasn't across the board like the manager said, we are hitting opposite field in this thing, whether you like it or not. And maybe some of the players don't buy into it, and that's another problem when the players are making 10 times what the manager is. But I think this whole home run thing is going to come to an end pretty, I wouldn't be surprised if it was 3 years. 3 years, they'll be back to.
It depends on the ball. They don't tell us everything, and what they're doing with the ball this year. You guys read that. If you're reading up now about what the league's trying to tell us about the ball, the buoyancy, etc. And I was talking to Las Vegas Chris, But here's the deal with that, and that is, it wasn't very long ago, 2015, when the Kansas City Royals were a pedestrian offense. All they did was listen to what they did. They put the ball in play. They put a ball, a bat, and if they got to the sixth inning with the lead, game set match. He had 3 of the best relievers in baseball, and they didn't hit a lot of home runs. Now it's home runs and strikeouts, and I get in arguments, discussions, dialogue with people even at Wage Talk. You won't change my mind, but as long as we have the ball we have, if you can't miss bats, you will never be an elite pitcher or be considered. You cannot even possibly. You can't even be successful hardly. So that's just my take.
I will say this about the ball. It's the seams. Okay, so for example, Major League Baseballs, no matter what you look at, have the seams closest to the cowhide.
Not this year.
In college baseball, you can feel it. The seams are raised. The pitchers then can do what? Get more spin on the ball, more strikeouts, and there's less offense. It's not because they're college teams and don't know how to score runs. And you definitely see it in the minors. Like single A baseball, if you like offense, it's not your cup of tea because the games end up 3-0, 3-1, and that's part of the reason. And I don't know what's going on with this ball. I heard today somebody sent me a direct message on Twitter. Did you hear that they're using 2 different types of balls to decide which one they're going to go with?
Yeah,
I mean that sounds like something Bud Selig would do.
If that's accurate, that's not good for us who are trying to prognosticate.
Can we find out which innings they're using which ball? Because that would be tremendous information as a handicapper. The other thing I was going to say, Tony, talking about just home runs and stuff, one constant with baseball, and it applies kind of to the NBA as well. Like these guys are getting bigger, taller, stronger, and the hoops are still at 10 feet. Same thing with baseball. I mean, it's a fixed ballpark.
Don't go there, Steve. Right? They got to make the court bigger.
Stronger than ever. And you're like, well, so are the pitchers. But these guys could all hit a 100-mile-per-hour fastball. John knows that. It's the off-speed pitches that makes or breaks these guys. So when you've got a faster pitch and stronger hitter than ever, it's easier to hit it over the 300-and-some-foot fence that's been out there for 50 years.
Yep.
Yet I go back to what I said earlier. Oakland in the 90s switched everything up with Moneyball. Now it's kind of the opposite of Moneyball. It's all about power offense. You'll take the strikeouts. There's going to be room for a team to sneak in. And the Tampa Bay Rays, maybe have kind of done it in sorts. Like Kansas City's a perfect example. They kind of did it ugly. San Francisco played that way a lot of years as well, and they got it done with starting pitchers. There's an opportunity for teams to kind of sneak into the playoffs with the expanded playoffs now and be more of a defensive pitching-oriented team and really cause havoc in these 5- and 7-game series. Because if you go cold, it's like the three-point shot in college hoops. It's so random now. It decides these NCAA tournament games, these one-off games. But if you go cold, like Virginia did a couple years ago to a 16 seed, you can lose to anybody or anybody can beat anybody. It's the same thing with that home run, man. You rely on that too much, and you go cold for the wrong 2 or 3 games during the playoffs. It doesn't matter in the regular season, but it does in the playoffs. I think there's an opportunity to see some teams kind of sneak in with a different mindset. But, yeah, that's
I agree.
That's the new mindset nowadays, though, home runs and strikeouts.
Yeah.
Speaking of the basketball, Steve, the 3 of us, and maybe we can wind the show up on this topic. Since you're on the show, you're obligated to tell us what you think of the 2 semifinal games. Yeah. And as a consensus, would you like to know first who we kind of like as a consensus? And I think I have it as a consensus.
It's a shocker, Steve. It's absolutely shocking who we like.
Actually, I'm messaging Joe Ranieri right now. We'll be done in about 10 minutes because he's ready for me to record my contrarian, my betting market video. So I have to hear this information, guys, and I will include it in my my Who the Public is On. Although I don't know you guys public, though, so I want to hear it.
Well, I think we're on Houston. I like Houston quite a bit. And that's obviously not the public bet. The public is all over Baylor. The public is all over Gonzaga. But we do like Gonzaga a little bit, the 3 of us, right?
Well, I sure like him to advance this weekend. Advance Saturday.
Pick Tony Finn.
Yeah,
I do.
Especially like the over in that game. I'm higher on the total than I am the side. I'm not.
That is right from yesterday. Yeah, it's more the over now that I remember our show.
Yeah, Rob.
Over Gonzaga.
I'm debating, Rob, between Gonzaga and the over because instead of laying the big points, I'm almost wondering, do you think it is better to play the over because they smash them? I mean, I definitely will say this, guys. I don't like UCLA, and I don't really like the under either. But that's definitely a correlated parlay. So anybody out there likes UCLA, why would you not play a 2-teamer there?
Anybody, if you're playing against Gonzaga.
Do I see UCLA winning a high score?
I agree.
I just don't see that happening.
That's right. No, I agree.
And if anybody's going to regress, it's the UCLA defense. Obviously stepping up in talent here, possibly the best college basketball team, offensive efficiency that we've seen in 20 years and maybe more.
Yeah.
And I think that's where this could get to be. If Gonzaga's up 25 at the half, pace is not going to matter.
Yeah,
Gonzaga's not going to put the brakes on.
That number one ranked interior defense didn't matter when they were down, 17-4 or whatever the game started. So.
Yeah, because you know why, Steve? Because they didn't come up and allow USC to set up that half-court defense. And when your 2-point defense becomes defending against open floor layups because they're in fast break mode, then it's just not the same 2-point defense. Real quick, guys, and we talked about it a little bit with Gonzaga, but Lon Kruger for Oklahoma is a great coach, has been for a long time. He came with a game plan. He had a defensive team, a shorthanded team, try to slow Gonzaga down. He loses 83-71. USC had a defensive team, had length, had the ability to stop people from shooting. They lose 84-71 or whatever it was. So UCLA, Mick Cronin could have all the time he wants, in my opinion, to come up with a good game plan. He's a great coach. But how do you stop this team from scoring in the middle 80s? And
he doesn't have.
Cover. They could lose 83-69 and cover by a half a point, but it's going to go over the total.
This isn't Mick Cronin's group. You're right. These are not Mick Cronin kids. They're not defensive players. And his style and his mode. No, you're right.
You know what? Michigan wanted to play that game with UCLA, right? They didn't mind getting into the half court street fight. It doesn't matter. But Gonzaga's not going to play that way. They just don't. And
there's only one way to beat them.
Every single game they played in this tournament, Gonzaga has hit 148 or better. We're looking at.
They're going to beat themselves. You're not going to beat Gonzaga. They're going to have an off. It's going to be a miserable game. It's going to have to be a miserable shooting game to beat Gonzaga. So, is there anybody good enough right now left to stop Houston? Houston might be the best defensive team left. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But
they're definitely. I mean, Gonzaga and Houston are the two best defensive teams left. That's what's so funny about the UCLA matchup is we're thinking this is an ugly, slow down style. That's what USC does, not as slow. But USC is much better statistically defensively than UCLA. UCLA might play slower, but that doesn't make them better defensively. And I actually didn't even realize how much lower UCLA ranks defensively until I looked at it this week. This isn't the matchup. And, Rob, it's interesting. By the way, Rob, Oklahoma lost by 16, and I want to not say 12. The reason that's important, of course, is because this spread is 14. And I brought that up earlier this week on a show I did. I was like, everyone's talking about what a big number this is. No. Whatever. I mean, they beat Oklahoma, an 8 seed, by more. They beat Creighton, a 5 seed, by more. They beat USC, a fellow Pac-12 team that was better this year, by 19. It's like, why they've
beaten everybody. They've beaten everybody by double digits except for a couple games. Those were conference games, if I'm not mistaken.
Real quick here, guys, to get this thing over the total. The other side doesn't even have to shoot well. 3 of the 4 teams Gonzaga has played in this tournament haven't shot 40%. Haven't shot better than 40%, 40 or lower, and the games still go over. So I mean, whether you're Norfolk State or you're Oklahoma or you're USC or you're UC, those teams wind up getting theirs because they're in chase mode. They're coming from behind. Out the window goes the slow game plan. To me, it's UCLA doesn't even have to shoot great to get to 70 points here. But Gonzaga's going to find their way to 85.
Yeah, no. Listen, this is not a good defense. This UCLA team, if you trust Ken Palm, you trust the professor. Take a look at their offensive efficiency numbers. It's not Mick Cronin like at all.
Yeah, and Tony, most people probably would lose that bet, wouldn't they? If you told them it's 13-45, they would think it's the other way around. Because I was surprised there was that much of a spread. I don't look at them that often, but I'll glance at them this time of year. And the other thing I'll point out, guys, this UCLA run, how remarkable it's been. They were down by 11 at halftime to Michigan State in the play-in game. The game line at that point was +9. They had an 18% chance of winning at halftime at that point. They're down by 5 with a minute and a half to go against Michigan State. Before they force overtime, they had a 17% chance of winning at that point in the game, let alone going on to win 5 more games and beating a 1 and 2 seed. They've allowed their opponents have shot 25% from three-point range. On the season, UCLA was basically an average three-point defense. So there again, we're talking about that great equalizer. And yes, maybe it won't continue here, but Gonzaga doesn't rely much on the three. That's why Gonzaga is so dangerous, is because they're the best offensive team I've maybe ever seen since I've been handicapping college hoops, and they don't even rely on the three. So it's just like Rob said, they're consistently getting there every game because you can't stop them. And they're not going to stop themselves when they're getting layups and dunks and 2-point shots. So
they pass the ball.
Yeah,
they spread the court and pass the ball better than any team I've ever seen in college basketball. Yeah. And not just in a half-court set, in a full-court set. They do more with less speed and tempo than any team I've ever seen.
I can't agree. I mean, I do agree. I can't agree more. But yeah. I will give you this little stat that I pulled out of the database yesterday. So based on the line, Gonzaga and the 14 and a half, and especially no matter who plays in the championship game, if it's Baylor, that total is probably going to be in the 156, 157 area, I'm figuring. At the end of the day, it means that Gonzaga scores 81 or more points and shoots better than 50% from the field, and that's reasonable because they've only shot 49.3% as their season low twice. So you want to know how Gonzaga does over the last 10 years when they score 81 or more points and shoot better than 50% from the field? They are 124-1 straight up.
They lost?
They lost. I could actually, I could pull that and tell you who it was, but
I'm certain it was St. Mary's. But go ahead.
You might be right. I think you might be right. 84, 27, and 3 against the spread for 76% winners over the last 10 years when they do those two things. Wow. And I think in either game, this one or the final, and you have to see how Houston does against Baylor, but it stands to reason they're not in any position to be regressing right now, and they might even get better. Yeah.
Yes,
but let's see where the loss was.
A couple days ago, they've got the look-ahead line: a Gonzaga 5.5, 160.5 against Baylor.
Yeah.
Wow.
Against Houston, the look-ahead is -10. Gonzaga 143.5. So you're talking about a 17-point difference in the total based on who they play.
I'll play them right now. I'm sorry, guys. It's not really anything. It is. Rick Pitino needs to be the coach of in this Gonzaga. Then we can confidently know that we have a coach that's coaching at the point spread instead of winning the game. That's what we need. We need a coach that's just coaching to beat the point spread. That's it.
To go farther in the tournament.
Yeah, that's the question.
It'd be even better if somebody asked that in a press conference.
Oh yeah, well.
Real quick.
So the last time they.
Let me get this real quick for Steve. The unlikelihood numbers, the percentage numbers that you had on UCLA, and what the unlikelihood of them winning that Michigan State game was at times. What would have been the unlikelihood percentage that Houston is even still alive when they trailed Rutgers 58-49 with about 2.5 left in the game, and go on a 14-2 run to end that game to win it? That percentage must have been, I don't know, less than 10% that they would even get out of battle.
Even lower. Because how many minutes were left?
2.5 left in the game, right? And it was 58-49 Rutgers.
Yeah.
We can go back and get it.
Yeah, it's we had the Earl Roberts bet, with a minute 20 to go, and they were down 2.
Upon the ESPN thing, it would have said 99.9%. It would have been a 10%. Those algorithms they use, which are crazy, but yeah, it's not. That's March. That's college basketball March. April is a beautiful thing, isn't it?
Well,
it's a beautiful thing.
It's probably not 99.9. Not to disagree.
No, I'm
saying
that's what they say. Those algorithms they have.
If it was, if the score was 100-92 at the time, then 99.9 was probably right. But the fact that it was so low scoring, it was probably.
Oh, you mean in reality? Yes.
Yeah.
The 10% is that they might that 5 of them might come up dreadfully sick, and they don't have enough players to finish the game, and they had to forfeit, although they're still up by 20.
Yep.
And there's the 0.1%.
Now, here's how you beat Gonzaga. The 124-1.
The old adage, guys, used to be that in order to win this tournament, to win 6 games, you would have to get past one of those type games. You were going to get a scare.
Absolutely.
That's the case Houston might get there, but it hasn't really been the case last 5 or 6 years. We've seen, I think, 3 teams go 6-0 against the spread, the eventual champions over the course of the last 5-6 years. So Gonzaga right now 4-0. And real quick, their numbers in the tourney, they're shooting 53.5% from the floor, 40.4% from 3, 80.3% from the free throw line. And defensively, they're only allowing 39.8%, and their games are still going over, which just goes to show you that.
If they're efficient offensively, their defensive efficiency is over the top, and that the way they score, the way they play offense, the way they do things, they're not physically so gifted that they're an elite defense. Everything's technically perfect almost. It just is.
Yeah, and that's right on their season averages too. It's actually a little bit below in the scoring end, but you wanted to know the lone loss and when Gonzaga scores 81 and shoots 50% or better. It occurred on a Saturday in December of 2018 on the 15th day.
Non-conference.
And now this is the recipe, what you have to do to beat Gonzaga, because they were 10-point favorites, and in North Carolina beat them 103-90.
There you go.
Right.
Key point is they scored 103.
Yeah, Baylor could do that better than Houston, and that's interesting because I keep saying
That's
Houston
true.
is the team that could give them trouble because they can muck it up, slow it down, and they're much more efficient than UCLA or USC is in the half court, both sides of the ball. But that's interesting, John, because Baylor is the best offensive team left after Gonzaga. Yeah. So that's a very interesting theory. It's making me change my mind on that a little bit. Rob, real quick. 4:55 left. Rutgers was up 58-49. Houston had a 10% chance of winning still, so that was realistic.
That was how much time?
About 5 minutes left in the game. It was a tighter game with the
with 5 minutes left. Yeah.
So UCLA
time was the enemy.
11% and theirs was 10. So neither one should be around, really, right? They both were about 90% chance of losing.
Well, yeah, UCLA was about 17-18%, so they actually had a better chance. But then again, that was just the play-in game to get to the round of 64. And what's funny, guys, is every TV talking head said that Michigan State would be the play-in team that went several rounds. So they got the game right. They just had the team wrong this year. Which one did it?
Unbelievable. It's fun. Yeah. Who's the big? We haven't talked at all about this, but. It's just too early. Anybody in the NBA that we can just share with the millions of people listening to us right now so they can bury a book somewhere?
I've got a free baseball play on WakeTalk.com. Dodgers in the bounce back spot on the run line I used as my free play.
I like that too. I like that game too.
Can Trevor Bauer's spin rate be up in Coors Field, John?
Yeah,
because there's less wind, less resistance. It's thinner.
All you have to do is talk badly about Trevor's mom when you're in the batter's box. You got him right where you want him. I promise you.
Or ask Zach Greinke, what do you think of Trevor Bauer?
Well, I don't know. But I know that he'll tell you exactly how he feels. That's the damn case.
That's why Bauer will bring his A game tonight in his debut, in my opinion.
All right.
Go,
Trevor, go.
So to put a big bow on this show so Steve can get over to Joe and tell him how much we love him, we should bring Joe on this show too sometime.
Sucking up to Joe. He doesn't react. He reacts much better to boxing than he does sucking.
Well, we could bring him on the show and we could talk, linear algebra, nonlinear equations, and make him sit there and listen.
John,
I wouldn't do that to anybody.
That would kill him.
I was talking to him this morning. We did the FCS football show early this morning. Joe was running it, and he said, Rob, I had no idea that whiteboard was coming. He was busy all day. He was on another show. He said he just showed up for the NBA tip-off, and they sprung that whiteboard on him. So it really did make his head explode. It was fantastic.
I take full responsibility for that, Steve. I probably could have been fired.
Yeah,
I don't think so. It'd take a lot more than that. Have you not heard me on a few shows? Take a hell of a lot more than that.
That was the hardest I've ever heard Joe Ranieri laugh on this Wednesday's show, so it was well worth it.
Well, I was working with the relatively new guy, Will, right? So the first one I sent wasn't high enough resolution because I just took my camera, took a picture of something in my library.
That should have been part of it.
I had to recreate the monster. But yeah,
the resolution of this chart prohibits Team A from scoring.
The
more
original
than 20
plan was like we expected Ranieri to go, "What in the hell is that?" And then Rob Veno steps in and says, "Well, I don't know what your problem is, Joe. I clearly see what this system is telling us." And then he was going to rattle it off.
Then they tried to pass it off. Well, Finn won't be able to do anything with this. So Tony, what? It's pretty clear, Joe. Quite clear.
Love it.
Probably.
All right, so let me just jot down the best bets here so I can retweet this later. We have the Lakers by me and a few others. We have
Dodgers minus 1.5 run line.
Yep.
I'll use that.
Yep. And
I'll take
then
give me the Knicks plus 6.
All right, yep. Knicks plus 6, and then we have over Gonzaga.
I like guys. Let's just forget it. I like Gonzaga. Everything you said today. They have to shoot like me. The 4 of us. They would have to shoot like us to lose.
Well,
and I think they can shoot better than us blindfolded.
People overthink things sometimes, like these big games. It's like almost nobody thinks Gonzaga has a 90% chance mathematically of winning. I mean, so it's likely it's going to happen. I think it's probably higher. But it's like we're all trying to make 100% perfect play. We're thinking, how could UCLA maybe cover? We just need to hit. We don't even need to hit 60%. We only need to hit 55% long term.
Right.
We might be vastly overthinking this whole thing.
I think we are.
A 55% or better chance that Gonzaga wins by more than they've beaten Oklahoma, Creighton, and USC so far. So it's just funny. I thought of that the other day. I'm glad I got to mention it because it's just funny how with these big games we overanalyze them sometimes.
Is it not fair? Is it not fair at this point in time?
For UCLA in this one.
Is it not fair to just basically say, Steve, isn't it fair for us to go to the pregame presser, and say, listen, how are you going to coach so that we can beat the point spread in this game? That's all you have to ask them. Because that's a fair question. I don't think I may get kicked out of the room and politically correct, but it's really the fair question.
But I do think the over is a good little hedge there, like Rob's saying.
I agree.
And that's where I'm kind of going back and forth on Gonzaga or the over, or maybe if not both. I think they're somewhat correlated because, like I said, the only way UCLA and the under makes a lot of sense. So Gonzaga and the over is probably correlated the other way. All right, boys. I'm going to go say hi to Joe for you.
All right, tell me we said hi, and we'll invite him on.
Hey, guys.
We'll have fun with him.
Thanks, Steve. The best of this Good Friday to you all.
See you, Tony. Thanks, John.
Good Friday.
You bet.
Good Friday. It's Good Friday.
It is Good Friday.
Be good.
It's Good Friday.
Be good, guys.
So for Rob Veno, Steve Merrill, Tony Finn, and everyone else, including myself, John Ryan, and the Predictive Playbook, may all the wins be yours.